Today I rank my top 10 teams in college football. I'm Nathan Gustafson, and this is Clutch Time. Alright, so we'll jump right into it with number 10, the Michigan Wolverines. Although they got off to a very cold start to the year, coming alive and just beating the living crap out of Notre Dame was very impressive. I'm still very much a Shea Patterson doubter. I think he's one of the most overrated players in college football history. And sort of even that hype has died down. I can't really call him overrated anymore when most of sports media is bashing him, but the rest of this team is really good. Jim Harbaugh did a great job of keeping things under control when everything seemed to be going in the wrong direction for Michigan. That was a huge win for them over Notre Dame. The near comeback against Penn State, who was undefeated, was also very impressive. And because of those two games and the last 6 quarters played by Michigan of just stellar football, I give them the 10 spot on my ranking. All right, coming in at number 9, I have Oklahoma. Obviously a very disappointing loss to K-State, but they kind of are what I've told you they are all along. A team more than capable of putting up points on just about anyone in the country, but not really made to compete with the top 4 to 5 teams in the country. Because of their inability to get the job done on the defensive side of the football, they're under-recruited on that end of the ball. For being such a blue-blood college football program, it really shouldn't be that hard to get good defensive players, but for some reason they continue to struggle to do so. And because of really only being half of a good team, only being able to play on the offensive side of the football, that is the only thing holding Oklahoma down on this list. Jalen Hurts is incredible, Lincoln Riley's incredible, but as long as their defense is atrocious, got to hold them down here at the 9 spot. All right, coming in at number 8, I have Florida. I'm not overly impressed by them, but the fact that they did beat Auburn and they competed with LSU for the better part of the game, a team I believe to be a top 2 team in the entire country, and for that reason, I'm going to give Florida the 8 spot. Likely would drop out of this list if you check back in with me next week. I think that Georgia is going to whack them on the field on Saturday. I think that they're a little bit overmatched. They're not quite as good as they've been made out to be, but nevertheless, like I said, I have to be impressed by the fact that they were able to beat Auburn and then able to compete with LSU on the road in Death Valley in a night game, something that's not easy to do at all. And for those reasons, I give Florida the 8 spot. All right, coming in at number 7, I have Penn State, and this one's pretty simple. They're undefeated. I can't really knock anything about this Penn State football program. Their greatest tests are all laid out in front of them. I do think that they're going to get whacked by Ohio State when they step on the same field as them. They have some other difficult games coming up with the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who are surprisingly undefeated. And really, this Big Ten conference, though, is the second best in the country. They've done a stellar job blowing through it to this point, and because they're undefeated, I have to give them the 7 spot. However, like I said, I'm not overly impressed by quite anything that they've done. And there's big test ahead. Maybe Penn State, this is a team that's more than alive for a playoff spot. If they mess around and it would stun the crap out of me, but if they were able to do it, if they were able to beat Ohio State, that would be just impressive as hell, and I would have to put them higher on this list. But because of the lack of any signature wins so far, aside from Michigan, who they got spanked by in the second half of that game, I have to give them the 7 spot in my list. All right, coming in at number 6, how the mighty have fallen, the Georgia Bulldogs. I picked them at the beginning of the year to win the national championship. Since then, Jake Fromm has played like crap. They've underperformed. They're not able to stretch the ball down the field at all. They rely too heavily on DeAndre Swift, and even the defense has sort of slightly underperformed. I still think they have athletes everywhere on the field. They have NFL players on their team. This is still a top 2 to 3 offensive line in the country, if not the best one in the entire nation. But I'm going to give Georgia the 6th spot because I've been disappointed by their performance. Losing to South Carolina, being tested by a Notre Dame team at home that all of a sudden doesn't look very good after getting the crap beaten out of them by Michigan. And really, Georgia still has a chance to turn this around. I do believe that they're going to spank Florida on Saturday. And then from that point, they're going to eventually reach an SEC title game where they're going to go toe-to-toe with the winner of LSU and Alabama. And that is really going to be the tell for this team, whether or not they can rebound in that game. As of right now, I don't think there's any chance they can. They don't look like they're ready to compete with Alabama or LSU. But we will see, and I do think that after beating Florida this Saturday, which, like I said, I absolutely think they will, they're going to be given the opportunity to. Whether they'll actually be able to pull through on that, we'll see. But because of the athletes they have, because of the recruits that they have, because of the NFL potential on this roster, despite the struggles at quarterback and the underperforming, I still give Georgia the 6th spot in the country. All right, coming in at number 5, the Oregon Ducks, who were very impressive going into Washington and beating them. They have dominated their opponents largely this year. Obviously, a disappointing home performance against Washington State when they needed a last-second field goal to defeat a team that really shouldn't have been able to compete with them. With that being said, I think that was kind of a trap game. I think they were looking ahead to this week when they have to go to the Coliseum to play the USC Trojans, and I think that Oregon's going to be ready to play on Saturday. I think they're going to smack down on USC, and I believe that this is far and away the best team in the Pac-12. Justin Herbert should be a projected top 3 pick in the NFL. He's an outstanding football player. They have weapons all over the place on offense. CJ Verdell is one of the most underrated running backs in the country. They're very much multifaceted on offense. There's nothing they can't do to move the ball. Now, their defense started hot. It's played piss poor the last 2 games against both Washington and Washington State. We'll see how the defense shows up against USC in the Coliseum on Saturday. That'll be a big tell for what their defense will be able to do going forward. With that being said, if they win out their schedule, depending on what happens with LSU and Alabama and how everything else shakes out in college football, I would give them the nod as a one-loss conference champion over a one-loss Oklahoma team as a conference champion because of the increased competition that Oregon has had to play this year, because their only loss was a scheduled game against an elite out-of-conference opponent in Auburn, a game that they should have won, that I thought they played incredibly well in. They led for the majority of the game up until a final drive. 2 horrible fumbles, including a center snapping the ball over Justin Herbert's head and then him, just fumbling a handoff. You would have seen Oregon be undefeated to this point with a win against a top 10 SEC opponent. And then from there, Oregon would have gotten considerably more respect. So I would certainly give them a nod over Oklahoma. We'll see how the SEC shakes out, what goes down with Alabama and LSU. Obviously, a lot can happen, but right now I think that Oregon is absolutely a top 5 team in the country. All right, coming in at number 4, I have Clemson. Coming into the year, I would have had them at, 2 to 3, possibly 1. But I think that, myself and many people sort of undervalued them losing Clelin Ferrell, Christian Wilkins, Trayvon Mullen, all guys that got drafted in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft on their defense. They lost a lot of leaders on that side of the football, a lot of very talented players. And I think it's affected them in ways that maybe we didn't see coming. Obviously, they're still going to dominate their god-awful ACC schedule. They're going to crap all over bad teams. They're going to be in the playoff because they're going to be undefeated. However, just visually, when I compare them to what I believe are the top 3 teams in the country, I think they fall a little bit short. I think they rely way too much on their stud offensive players, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, T. Higgins, Justin Ross. All these guys are outstanding on offense, but it's sort of my thing with Oklahoma. Obviously, the Clemson defense is not the Oklahoma defense. They're competent, they're good, but I think we have undervalued how much Clemson lost on the defensive side of the ball. This is not the team that won the national championship this year. They're nowhere near as complete. They're younger than expected. All the talk at the beginning of the year about them being the best team in the country, being able to beat NFL teams, a lot of that has died down, and with good reason. Obviously, you shouldn't be getting tested by North Carolina. Moving forward, though, Clemson is going to go undefeated into the playoff, and I think that they'll be able to compete. They still have an outside chance at a national championship, but it's just a very young team with a lot of holes on their defense, and right now I have them at the 4th spot in the country. All right, coming in at number 3, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. Chase Young is the best defensive player in the country. Justin Fields is every bit as incredible as predicted by me. J.K. Dobbins is a beast. And they are just handing it to just about every opponent they played. Very impressive win over Wisconsin. Now as they move forward into their schedule, now we're going to see some tests. We're going to get Penn State eventually in a conference championship game. They're either going to get a rematch with Wisconsin, who they just smacked down, or they'll get an Iowa. A lot can happen here for Ohio State, but they look incredible. Their margin of victory, insane. Justin Fields, like I said, just an outstanding football player. There's really nothing for me to complain about. I could easily have them at 1, I suppose. My only thing is I do think that they're not as good as the top 2 teams in the country. I believe are a step above Ohio State, just in terms of talent and in terms of ability to lead on both sides of the football. Obviously, the Ohio State defense has been given a crap ton of credit, and rightfully so because of what they've held Big Ten opponents to. However, I just think the top 2 teams, LSU and Alabama, have experienced a tougher schedule against better teams, or at least LSU has for sure. Alabama has not been tested yet with their crappy schedule. But LSU, having played Florida, having played Auburn, I think they're in a better situation to have seen other competent football teams. But Ohio State's going to get that experience. I'm going to get a better idea once I see them go toe-to-toe with undefeated Penn State, and once I see them in a conference championship game. But there's a lot that can happen in here. I don't think that Ohio State, despite having top 4 talent in the country, I do think that there's a bit of a distinction between them and the top two teams. Which brings me to my number 2 team in the country, which I'm going to give to the Alabama Crimson Tide. Tua Tagovailoa, an incredible quarterback, what they're able to do on the offensive side of the ball. Just absolutely unrivaled in the country. The receivers that they have, Weddle, Devontae Smith, I think, caught 4 touchdowns in one game. That's what happens when you give Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs too much attention. The amount of weapons that they have on their offense, Najee Harris is a top 5 back in the country. This Alabama offense is stellar. But as I predicted at the beginning of the year, now at the beginning of the year, I made the bold prediction that they would lose a conference championship game to Georgia. I can no longer see that happening. I don't think that that's the case at all. But really the reasoning behind that was because I thought that their defense would take a step back, losing several players to the NFL, losing their stud linebacker Dylan Moses at the beginning of the year to an injury. I thought that that would set them back. And to be honest, I think that it still might. They haven't played any competent offenses yet. On their schedule. It's been mostly bad teams, and they've still given up some points. But the Alabama offense is likely the best one in the entire country, and for that reason, I still have them holding down the number 2 spot. But for me, the number 1 team in the country right now is the Louisiana State University Tigers. I mean, LSU is just different. They're just different. What their offense has been able to do with Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, all the weapons they have on the outside, there is nothing they can't do. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one of the more underrated players in the country. They control the line of scrimmage on offense. They've been simply stellar, and I think that the one hole in LSU has been their defense this year. They gave up 38 points to Texas. They gave up 38 points to freaking Vanderbilt, and I think that their defense has sort of underperformed, but Derek Stingley, a true freshman corner, has just been outstanding. I swear I don't think I watched an LSU game where that kid doesn't get a pick. Teams won't even throw at Christian Fulton, a projected first-round pick. You have Rashard Lawrence, one of the more dominant interior pass rushers in the entire collegiate football, and Grant Delpit, who we all know is just an absolute stud. And I think this defense has repeatedly underperformed so far this year, and I sort of can't help but feel like they're still due. They still haven't reached their peak, and that's why I'm going to give them the number 1 spot. Now, ultimately, which one of these 2 teams I actually view as the best team in the country will be decided when they meet and when they play each other a week from Saturday. That will be a big tell for what these 2 teams are capable of going forward. But as of today, right now, I think that LSU is the most talented team in the country, both sides of the football. They have the most NFL players on the field, both sides of the football. What Brady, the offensive coordinator in LSU, has done with this offense is just absurd. Joe Burrow already having thrown 30 touchdowns this year, 5 times more than he threw all of last season. It is just remarkable. And what you're seeing potential-wise with LSU is just insane. This is sort of my thing, going back to whether or not Oregon would get into the playoff if they were to win out and win the Pac, and how a 1-loss Oregon and a 1-loss Oklahoma would compare. If LSU and Bama's only loss is to each other, I don't see how you can hold either one of these teams out of the playoff. And then at the same time, what you're doing by doing that is crapping on conference champions. Like I said, repeated theme here on the show. I've emphasized it for years. We need an 8-team playoff, so that way bullcrap like this doesn't happen, where deserving teams are being held back from an opportunity to compete for a national title. But like I said, with that being said, the 4 best teams in the country right now, and I do think there's a distinction between 4 and 5, is Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson. Those are the 4 best teams in the country, and I do think that there's also a distinction between 3 and 2 because LSU and Alabama are the 2 best teams in the country, and I think we're going to have a good idea over who the best is when LSU makes the trip to Tuscaloosa next week. Alright, that's going to be it for us today. Thank you for watching. Make sure you tune in tomorrow where I give you my NFL predictions for for the rest of the season, what I think is going to happen. I give you my midway MVP and how I see that race shaking out. That will be tomorrow's episode, and then make sure you tune in again bright and early Sunday or late Saturday night. I'll get you my picks for the week as we get back to our regular schedule. Thanks for watching.